If you've ever walked down the street and nearly flatlined at the sight of a man face planting into a trash can, a lifeless body floating with balloons, a woman casually dangling out of a window, or a group of guys teetering on the edge of a skyscraper, hold off on dialing 911. Congrats! You've just stumbled into a Mark Jenkins installation, where the only real emergency is your rapidly declining faith in humanity. Jenkins's creations aren't just lifelike, they're disturbingly so. The kind that makes you wonder if the artist's true calling was as a crime scene photographer with a side hustle in trauma therapy. His figures, often slumped in dark alleys or dangling precariously from buildings, capture that fleeting moment between calling for help and realizing you've been played, again. It's performance art for people who don't realize they're in the audience until they're halfway to a panic attack. Before Jenkins was turning sidewalks into psychological minefields, he was actually on track for a much safer career in science. But, like a true American, he soon realized that dissecting frogs and analyzing water samples was nowhere near as fun as making strangers think they'd just discovered a corpse. I mean, why save the planet when you can just scare the hell out of everyone on it instead? In the early 2000s, Jenkins took a detour into street art while living in Rio de Janeiro, a city that's basically a live-action version of Grand Theft Auto. Inspired by the chaos, he began experimenting with tape and plastic wrap. Not to fix things, but to break minds. His first series, Storker, featured miniature babies made of tape in surreal settings, like infants crawling out of sewers as if auditioning for It, the prequel. Because nothing says art like making pedestrians question every life choice that led them to that street corner. Jenkins's process sounds like a DIY project straight out of a true crime documentary. He wraps himself or his volunteers in plastic wrap and tape, slices them out like some serial killer arts and crafts project, and reassembles the shells into fully dressed, all too human figures. The result? Scenes so real that even CSI interns would need a therapy session and a fresh pair of pants before realizing they've been punked by a guy with a Costco-sized stash of duct tape. Honestly, it's surprising he hasn't been sued by now. But there's a method to the madness. Jenkins's work isn't just about terrifying pedestrians or generating enough 911 calls to warrant a restraining order from the city council. It's a twisted mirror held up to society, reflecting our obsession with spectacle and our tendency to ignore real human suffering. Unless, of course, it's blocking traffic or looks great on Instagram. Take, for example, one of his infamous installations, a hooded figure, face down in a park pond. So realistic that even joggers start slowing down, debating if they should help or just keep running and hope someone else deals with it. Passers-by stop, not to help, obviously, but to pull out their phones. Because if a cry for help falls in the city and no one live streams it, did it even happen? Jenkins captures this bystander effect with a brutal sort of honesty, the kind that makes you laugh, then immediately feel bad for laughing, like watching a clown car pile up in slow motion, hilarious until you remember there are probably real clowns inside. It's darkly hilarious how we, as a society, will avoid eye contact with a homeless person, but will risk our lives for a selfie with a guy wrapped in duct tape. Jenkins's figures are metaphors for the invisible people we ignore every day. Except, these metaphors occasionally cause traffic jams and minor heart attacks. And then there's his favorite hunting ground, suburban neighborhoods. You know, those peaceful streets with meticulously trimmed hedges and at least one Karen peeking through the blinds, already halfway through dialing the HOA. In these settings, his sculptures, children with bags on their heads, people stuffed in garbage bins, aren't just urban commentary. They're basically horror movie scenes titled The HOA's Worst Nightmare. Because nothing screams family values like speed walking past what appears to be a corpse in your neighbor's recycling bin without making eye contact. Jenkins didn't just add a new medium to street art, he added a whole new genre, panic-inducing hyperrealism. His tape sculptures have inspired countless artists to rethink how they engage the public, transforming urban spaces into interactive psychological experiments. Think of it as a free therapy session, if your therapist was a sociopath with a tape gun. For the past few years, Jenkins has been dragging his freaky, lifelike sculptures all over the world, kind of like a weird sightseeing tour. In 2017, he teamed up with Balenciaga to mess with shoppers at their fancy new boutique in New York. At the core of Jenkins' work is a twisted sense of humor that feels uniquely American, a mix of slapstick and existential dread, like finding a clown in your closet with a student loan bill. His sculptures force us to confront our own apathy, our fascination with disaster, and our desperate need to believe that everything is fine, even when it so clearly isn't. Then, in 2018, he went full dark mode with Project 84, dropping 84 of his creepy figures on top of the ITV buildings in London to raise awareness about male suicide in the UK. By 2019, Jenkins was at the Rose Beton Art Festival in France, casually hanging his sculptures from bridges and plopping them on fountains like it was just another Tuesday. Most recently, he decided that Laguna Beach City Hall in California could use a little weirdness, so he set up 5 hooded figures called the Caretakers, each one doing something totally absurd, like vacuuming the lawn. Yep, that happened.
Yeah, I like it.
Of course you do, Mr. Beard. I'd be shocked if you didn't. Jenkins's life-size figures are all about making people do double takes and question what's real. He doesn't need to explain his work either. His sculptures do all the talking, whether they're lurking in public spaces or creeping people out in galleries. When he's not busy turning streets into horror comedy scenes, Jenkins is living and working just outside Washington, D.C. In the end, Jenkins's art is less about the tape and plastic wrap, and more about what they conceal. A hilariously dark, all too accurate portrayal of human behavior. And if his work makes you stop, think, get angry, laugh, maybe that's the real punchline. So next time you spot a man dangling out of a window or a kid with a bag on his head on a quiet street, hold off on calling the cops. If it crinkles like plastic, just smile, snap a photo, and remember, life's one big dark joke. And Mark Jenkins is just making sure we're in on it. So, is Mark Jenkins a genius with tape, or just some guy with way too much time on his hands? Let me know in the comments section below.